in the Teacher Education Department at San Diego State University, and she's also a classroom teacher at Health Sciences High and Middle College. She teaches reading methods, classroom management, and liberal studies at San Diego State, and ninth grade English at the high school level. In addition to her teaching responsibilities, she also serves as an instructional coach for teachers with varying levels of experience. She is the recipient of the Constant McCullough Research Award by the California Reading Association for her study on assessment and diagnostic instruction. She also received the IRA Celebrate Literacy Award, which honors Kelly for her significant literacy contribution. She has been published in The Reading Teacher and The California Reader, The Reading Professor, and Literacy. She has co-authored several books accommodating differences among English language learners, 75% plus literacy lessons, designing responsive curriculum, planning lessons for work, and teaching literacy in first grade. Kelly has taught not only the high school and the college level, but also grades 1 through 6, and worked as a peer coach and a reading intervention teacher. Dr. Diane Lapp is a distinguished professor of education in the Department of Teacher Education at San Diego State University also. She has taught in elementary and middle schools. She is currently also an English literacy teacher and instructional coach at Health Sciences High and Middle College in San Diego. Her major areas of research and instruction regard issues related to struggling readers and writers, their families, and their teachers. She is a co-editor of Voices from the Middle, published by NCTE. Dr. Lapp has also authored and co-authored, edited numerous articles, columns, textbooks, handbooks, and children's materials on reading. She has also chaired and co-chaired several IRA and Literacy Association, Research Association committees. Her many educational awards include being named as the Outstanding Teacher Educator and Faculty Member in the Department of Teacher Education at San Diego State. Also the Distinguished Research Lecturer from San Diego State Graduate Division of Research, IRA's 1996 Outstanding Teacher Educator Award, and IRA's 2011 John Manning Award recipient for her work in public schools. Dr. Lapp is also a member of both the California and the International Reading Halls of Fame. We are very excited at Sadlier to have both Dr. Lapp and Dr. Johnson here with us today. So I'm going to make Dr. Lapp the presenter right now, and let me know when you're ready, Dr. Lapp.
Hello. Thanks for joining us today. As you know, recent conversations among educators seem to be including many wonderings about the definition and scope of the Common Core state standards, and also about the specifics of their implementation and assessment. In today's webinar, we'll discuss some of these wonderings and also provide examples of how to use the Common Core standards as foundational ideas to support rigorous, intentional, close readings of text. More specifically, our purposes today are to share an overview that will help us to first understand the relationships between the Common Core state standards and the implementation of intentional, rigorous, discipline-based literacy instruction. We believe it's so important to understand how to implement Common Core-related instruction that involves talking, reading, and writing about a wide array of content. Secondly, today, we will focus special attention on understanding just how to engage students in a close analytic reading of texts. And finally, our third purpose is to understand how to support students developing their academic language proficiencies and then sharing them through both their written and spoken communication. Okay, to get us started, let's dig deeply into the Common Core State Standards to understand exactly what they are, how they were designed, why they were designed, and finally, how they support learning that's going to ensure that all students will be ready for college and also for the careers they choose. Let's begin with a video clip. The one we're about to show provides a nice overview of questions being asked about the definition of the Common Core Standards and the whys and hows of their design and implementation.
Hey, welcome back. How was your summer?
Great. I was finally able to get all those things done around the house. How about yours?
I worked off and on throughout the summer, trying to get ready for the Common Core Standards.
Oh, yeah. Talk to me about these standards. I remember hearing about them last year, but the information didn't really sink in. Is this just another term for something we already have? How are these different from the curriculum, that sort of standard course of study?
Actually, I think the Common Core Standards will really help our school, district, and state once we all start using them. They were created as a way to help states better align instruction within the state and between states. So far, 43 states have adopted the Common Core.
But what will it mean for us? More paperwork? More material we need to include? Is this just another hoop for us to jump through?
It doesn't have to be. From what I've seen, the Common Core is clear without being directive. It encourages all those things that are always bugging us about, like higher level thinking, collaborative learning, and 21st century skills. But it doesn't script out lesson plans or dictate methods.
Wait, I thought there were Common Core Standards for social studies. Does this mean we're off the hook?
Actually, social studies, science, and elective teachers will focus on the literacy standards.
Wait, now we have to teach reading and writing. Have you seen their spelling? It's atrocious.
We won't be taking the place of language arts teachers. We'll just be enhancing students' understanding of our subject matter through focusing on literacy.
How will this affect the curriculum maps we've already created?
Those have always been working documents, so this will be a good opportunity to go in, keep it still fit, and revise where we need to. Look, I know it seems like another change, but we can make this work. Let's just sit down with the standards and look for small ways we can start incorporating them this year.
So we don't have to fully implement them this year?
No. This is a transition year. The district knows we need time to discuss the standards of the PLC, revise the curriculum map, and begin thinking about assessments. We're not rushing into things.
Okay. That's a relief. All right. Let's go ahead and start looking at it as a PLC. Maybe there's places where it makes sense to go ahead and fit it in this year.
Hi everyone, this is Kelly. I just wanted to let you know a little bit about this site, this Xtranormal site. It kind of told a story of the Common Core Standards, and it's Xtranormal.com, and you can go to that, and it's a nice way to have your students make stories and have some of your instruction come to life, and it's a fun way for students to design actors and dialogue and backgrounds and tell different stories. I recently saw one on Neil Armstrong talking about his Apollo 11 landing, and Isaac Newton talking to Da Vinci set in the Louvre Museum in Paris. So it's a nice way to bring stories and some of your instruction to life.
And we need to bring these avatars up to date because since this little clip was made, 46 states have now signed on to use the Common Core Standards. So to reiterate what was shared in the video is that the Common Core State Standards are first blueprints of the expectations for K-12 students throughout the country in math and in the English language arts and literacy in history, social studies, science, and technical subjects. Secondly, they are an illumination of the scaffolded knowledge and understandings that students should acquire within their K-12 education careers, with the goal being that they will be well prepared for the workplace and college situations they choose. Finally, the Common Core standards offer us a broad vision of what it means to be a literate person in the 21st century. You know, another question often asked is, why were the Common Core standards designed? Well, the intent in designing them was to define a broad vision of what it means for every student to be career and college ready to participate in a global competitive society. The need to ensure equitable learning nationally for all students was established through findings being reported by many groups, including the Alliance for Educational Excellence, which is a Washington-based policy group, the Editorial Projects in Education Research Center, which is a nonprofit group that publishes Education Week, which many of you subscribe to, and the American Promise Alliance, which was the alliance founded by Colin Powell to create partnerships with America's youth. Well, these and other groups echo all of us, all educators' concerns that only 69 to 70% of students, you know, are earning a high school diploma, and that over 1/3 of students entering college need remedial work. Isn't that amazing? Only 69 to 70% of students are earning a high school diploma. Well, these staggering findings have caused a national alarm that hopefully will be addressed through the Common Core standards or through implementation of the Common Core standards. According to the 2011 National Report Card on Reading that was compiled by NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, listen to this, most of our students are scoring less than proficient in reading. And this is after 12 years of our attempts to teach them. So findings from the 2011 data indicate that 2/3 of our students scored below proficient on the assessment. More specifically, 62% of them were 12th graders, 66 were 8th graders, and 66% of 4th graders scored below proficient. No wonder we have a cause to look to do something different. Also, findings from the 27 TIMS study, which is the assessment of international trends in math and science, found that our American 8th graders ranked 11th worldwide in their scientific knowledge. And some of our subgroups, including Hispanic children who are learning English as a second language, and African American children, scored significantly lower. And most significantly, 7,000 students per day drop out of school. And most of the kids who are doing this are reading 5 years below grade level. Okay, now that I've given you a downer, to be a little more positive, our students can restate the facts. This was found on the National Assessment data. But this level of knowledge is very introductory. As you know, on Bloom's taxonomy, it's the lowest level. It signifies a very basic level of knowledge or understanding gained from reading and study. So the reason for the Common Core standards is that to move beyond this, we need to help students read deeply and process texts in all of the content areas. These data, now I'm going to show you a slide of some data that was collected in some schools in which my colleagues and I are working. And these data suggest to us that this is what happened in 15 classrooms during a 2,475 minutes of school time. Take a look at it for a minute. Notice that 48% of the students' time is spent listening. I'm sure that doesn't come as a surprise to you. But how about reading? Yes, only 6% of the class time was spent reading. 13% of the time was spent conversing in small groups, which is so unfortunate because many ideas are tried on in a small group setting or in a partner share. And only 2% of the instructional day was spent on writing. Well, this helps us to realize that you can't get good at something that you never do.
Another question that we hear many teachers ask is, how were the Common Core standards developed? How did this all come about? And there were some key players in this, and many of them came from the Council of Chief State and School Officers and Student Achievement Partners and the National Governors Association. And then add to that they were designed using international and state standards, current empirical research, and extensive feedback from state departments of education, educators from kindergarten through college, which is nice. They include all grade levels, professional organizations, and community groups. So that's kind of the who was involved in this and how they were developed. This talks about how are the anchor standards for literacy related to the Common Core standards. And the college and career readiness anchor standards for reading, writing, speaking, and listening and language were released in 2009, were really used as the foundation, or what they're calling the anchors, for developing the Common Core state standards, which followed in 2010. And you can see that there's 4 big headings here: the reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and language, and you can kind of see the different types of things that are stressed in each of the different areas. Today we're talking about the central ideas under this idea under the reading heading. So there are 10 Common Core state standards for reading, and they're divided into 4 major areas that you can see here. Key ideas and details. Some of the kinds of things under this include reading closely to determine what the text says explicitly and to make logical inferences. Another key idea is determining the central idea or themes of a text and analyzing their development, summarizing the key supporting details and ideas, and then finally analyzing how and why individuals or events and ideas develop and interact over the course of a text. Under craft and structure, we want students to be able to interpret words and phrases as they're used in the text, which includes figurative meanings and analyzing how specific word choices shape meaning or tone. We also want students to be able to analyze the structure of text, including how specific sentences and paragraphs work, and then how to assess point of view, which is often very difficult for students, or author's purpose. And the next section, integration of knowledge and ideas, we want students to be able to integrate and evaluate content presented in diverse media and formats, visually, quantitatively, as well as in words. We want students to analyze how 2 or more texts address similar themes or topics, and delineate and evaluate the argument and specific claims in a text. You can kind of see everything's going back to the text. We want a lot of text-based evidence in these standards. And the last section under range of reading and level of text complexity is we want students to read and comprehend complex literary and informational text independently and, of course, proficiently. There are anchor standards for writing as well, as you saw in a couple slides, previous slides, and each of these have some big ideas as well. Text types and purposes. This is all going to be about writing arguments and writing informative and explanatory text, writing narratives. It also is going to talk about production and distribution of writing, which is about organization and style and planning and revising. Under research and building, research to build and present knowledge, we're talking about gathering information from multiple print and digital sources, to name just one. And then under range of writing, talks about writing routinely over extended time frames. There are also anchor standards for speaking and listening. And under comprehension and collaboration, we want students to effectively be able to participate in a range of conversations and integrate and evaluate information and evaluate a speaker's point of view. We want students to be able to make strategic use of their digital media and adapt their speech to a variety of contexts. And that's under the bigger idea of presentation of knowledge and ideas. And lastly, you can see the anchor standards for language, and there's 3 big ideas behind that. And the kinds of things that these anchor standards address are the conventions of standard English grammar. So we're talking about punctuation, spelling, writing, how language functions, and vocabulary use, clarifying the meaning of unknown words, figuring out multiple meaning words, some of the issues around vocabulary. Today, we're focusing on the reading. Future webinars, we will focus on some of the anchor standards in writing and speaking and listening and language. But today we really want to take a close look at the reading and focus on close reading. The standards talk a lot about analyzing text and how to get students to get back in the text and find out what the author's saying and what's meant from the text. And so you're going to hear the word close reading a lot as the standards get played out. And so some of the key components that are included in close reading is that it's really a shared responsibility for research-supported literacy instruction by all teachers. In that Xtranormal video that you saw at the beginning of our webinar here, you heard the gentleman say, "Oh, do I have to do this too?" You know, and the answer is yes. You know, that all teachers are going to be talking about speaking and reading and writing, no matter if you're in science or history or some of the technical subjects. It's also that more informational text in multiple formats is going to be closely read. Students are going to be doing a lot more reading of these kinds of text. The text complexity is also going to increase, but fear not, so are the supports. You know, we're not just going to throw harder stuff at students. We're going to support them and give them what they need to access and understand these complex texts. And then that students are going to consistently and continuously address text-dependent questions. They're going to really rely on questions and finding that evidence in the text. That opinion-based instruction in the early years and argumentation in the middle and upper grades, we're going to hear that word a lot, be supported, again, with that text-based evidence. And finally, that students be taught to use academic vocabulary in their oral and their written presentations. So as we've said, there are approximately 10 anchor standards in each area of literacy, reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And all additional standards are scaffolded by grade levels to accomplish these. For example, in reading, Anchor Standard 1 emphasizes the significance of close reading. You can see that. Read closely to determine what the text says explicitly and to make logical inferences from it. Cite specific textual evidence when reading or speaking to support conclusions drawn from the text. That's Anchor Standard number 1. So we're going to share with you a little bit. So what does that mean for a kindergartner? You know, how do we know that a kindergartner has mastered this anchor standard and can do this? And so you can see here that a child in kindergarten would have mastered this if, with prompting and support, they can ask and answer questions about key details in a text. What does this look for a third grader? Well, if they can ask and answer questions to demonstrate understanding of a text, referring explicitly back to the text as the basis for the answers. Grade 5, what does that look like as a fifth grader? How are you going to know that you can do that? That you're going to be able to quote accurately from a text when explaining what the text says explicitly and when drawing inferences from the text. And finally, in grades 7 and 8, the students are going to be able to master this anchor standard when they're able to cite several pieces of textual evidence to support the analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text. You can notice how the depth of analysis continues to grow, and it's very scaffolded. From scaffolded instruction regarding a close reading of text, students are getting deeper and deeper into this throughout the grades. So here's a nice slide to show what's coming up from the Common Core state standards. Well, they're identifying the scaffolded tasks, and as you just saw from the anchor standards, that's what they're providing us as teachers. They're providing those anchor standards and telling us what is a student supposed to do in kindergarten and in first grade and third grade under that particular anchor standard. The teachers are going to have to identify some text and instruction. So the nice thing about the standards are that they're not going to tell us exactly how to teach. They're not going to give us a script. They're just providing the tasks, and we get to come up with the text and instruction. The standards do give some text that you can use as a teacher. Some of them on the list include Charlotte's Web and Sarah Plain and Tall and the Story of Ruby Bridges, to name a few. But you can venture out and pick your own text and use your own instruction that will help your students. And finally, the students themselves, the readers, the learners, they're going to be the ones who are applying these behaviors. So in a nutshell, the Common Core standards really are a shift from the focus of literacy instruction to a careful examination of the text itself. The standards are going to require using materials that support reading and writing and speaking and listening, really with that emphasis centered on the text. And that students are reading an adequate range and complexity. This is an important point because we all know that putting children in texts that are too difficult for them only leads to high anxiety, lack of interest, unmotivated students. So this is going to be a really important piece. And additionally, the standards are focused on students reading closely to draw evidence from the text. And then finally, that educators have to think about the text that students read and the kinds of questions students should address as they write and speak about those texts.
So now that we've thought about what the Common Core standards are and how they were developed, and we've identified that there are anchor standards in each of the language arts and how they play out grade by grade, let's think about anchor standard number 1 in reading and think about what's involved in teaching a close reading of a text. Well, to begin, this involves selecting shorter, challenging texts at each grade level. And as Kelly said, there are exemplars of possibilities for us listed in one of the appendices of the Common Core standards, but we're not held to those. We can use, rich texts that are not on that list. Then by scaffolding instruction to support a student's ever-developing basis of knowledge and language and skills, they'll be able to access complex text directly rather than are reducing them in class to reading less difficult text. And so we won't have in class anymore those who can read a complex text and those who cannot. Next, by selecting and teaching texts similar to those identified as the exemplars, we can ensure that students are learning to read complex texts with fluency and with comprehension. So as part of our related text instruction, we should focus on teaching the academic vocabulary that is real prevalent in those complex texts. Students should be taught to use academic language when they're reading and writing and speaking, and also comprehend academic language they hear. This will ensure that their knowledge of academic language will become one that it becomes an easily accessed language discourse for them. Additionally, teaching a close reading involves selecting a high-quality text, then supporting students in asking and answering a significant percentage of questions, and also performing tasks that are text-dependent. A lot of T's there. So answering text-based questions requires that students use and draw from textual evidence to make and support their logical inferences. Texts should be taught, not assigned, because without instruction, we know from years of doing this as teachers that most students will be unable to read increasingly difficult texts if there's no teacher by their side teaching them how to do this. Simply selecting a hard book and telling a child to read it just won't work. They must be taught how to do this. So a close reading then involves a deep analysis of the text. This occurs by returning to the text more than once to think again about the language, the structures, and the author's intention. Our instruction should include modeling how to do a close reading, how to conduct a close reading, because when teachers model how to make successful returns to a text to gain additional insights, students will continue to grow in their understanding of how to do this also. Again, let's think about what's involved in a close text reading. First, select a short passage, and then identify the purpose of the reading. For example, the purpose might be to provide students with experiences that allow them to delve deeply into the text, to enjoy, to analyze the context, and or to experience the language patterns and the text structures. When students are being introduced to a procedure, a skill, or a strategy through close reading, it's wise to use a short piece of text. Constraining the amount of text under investigation helps helps the students to see how to apply a skill such as analysis, and also limits the amount of time required to teach the skill or the strategy. You know, to really understand a text, a reader will likely have to read it more than one time. Well, long pieces of text make that hard to do for students, especially as they move across the content areas. As Tom Newkirk noted for us, we really never comprehend these anchoring passages. We're never done with them. We never finally consume them. Like sacred texts, they are inexhaustible. They continue to move us, support us, and even surprise us as we return to them again and again and again. And also, according to reader response theory, we know that there are numerous possible interpretations of a text, and an individual's interpretation may change over time as they go back and revisit a text again. So it's important as a teacher to model for students how to also chronicle, how to note-take, how to keep track of the advances and changes in our base of knowledge over time. And that's why it's real important to read with a pencil in hand, so that you can model for your students how to interactively note significant information. Close reading does not mean that the reader has to agree with everything that's read, but the reader should understand what he or she is reading. There's a seminal text called How to Read a Book by Adler and Van Doren that helped us to realize that marking a book may be indispensable if we're really reading it. First, it keeps you awake, not merely just conscious, but wide awake. Secondly, reading, if active, involves us in thinking, and thinking tends to express itself in words that are spoken or written. So there's the reason for jotting them down. I know that some of you are dying thinking that I'm telling you to write in a book, but maybe you could put some Post-it notes along the sides. The person who says that she knows what she's thinking but can't express it usually doesn't know what she's thinking. So it's important to have that kind of interaction with the text. And third, writing your reaction helps you remember the thoughts of the author. So by annotating a text, whether it's informational or persuasive or narrative, students can also be taught how to slow down their reading so that they can mine the depths of the concepts and arguments and metaphors that are used by the writer. While this practice isn't necessary or, of course, not desirable for everything we read, it's important that students know how to conduct a close reading when the information in a text requires a close inspection to help them unlock the meaning. It's also important to note perplexing questions and language that we want to remember. As Louise Rosenblatt taught us in 1995, the reader must, even though the reader's doing an analysis and connecting information to him or herself, they must remain faithful to the author's text and must be alert to the potential clues concerning the character and the character's motives. Rosenblatt worried that readers might ignore elements in a text and fail to realize that what they are attributing to the author may not be justified. So reading with a pencil then helps us to realize that the text is the significant element in meaning making when reading. Pay attention to patterns. Model for children how to ask what is the message and how the message is being shared. What are the language patterns, the informational patterns, and the structural patterns? These attempts to answer patterns involve what Freebody and Luke described as 4 roles necessary for every reader to assume personally to be considered a proficient reader. And these involve being a code breaker who can understand the text at the surface level, the alphabetic level, the structural organizational level. Secondly, being a meaning maker who comprehends the text at the level that the author intended, so getting the author's meaning. Third, a proficient reader is a text user who analyzes the factors that influence the author to write the text and what the text is saying. This involves also thinking about the historical grounding of the text in which it was written. And finally, being a proficient reader means that you become a text critic who understands that the text is not neutral and that within that text there are existing biases that inform and try to persuade us. And proficient readers who are really active while reading are able to understand and take all of those positions. To become proficient readers, it's our job. Students should not be told all of the information about the text. They should be taught and encouraged to wrestle with ideas. They should be shown through our modeling how to return again and again for further analysis. The goal is that all students become skilled, that they will be able to access increasingly complex texts with their peers and also on their own when we're no longer in their worlds. So we have one more video. The following video highlights the points that we've been making.
There are 4 things you need to consider when doing a close reading. Language. Look at the diction or the word choice. What words did the author choose to repeat or emphasize? Narrative. Pay attention to who is telling the story and how it is being told. Syntax. Examine the order in which the words appear.
Context. The text doesn't exist in a vacuum, so take note of the historical context and the author's background.
Let's try doing a close reading of this passage from Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. You'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know. You'll get mixed up with many strange birds as you go. So be sure when you step with care and great tact, and remember that life's a great balancing act. Just never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up your right foot with your left. And will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98 3/4% guaranteed.
To start, the narrative of the poem takes the form of someone giving advice to the main character, only referred to as you. Though there are characters, most of the book uses second person and future tense. The characters probably serve to draw the reader into the story, which frames the advice that Seuss wants to impart.
I noticed that there is a repetition of "you'll get mixed up." I think this could show how it is inevitable that the person being addressed will get confused more than once in their life. Also, a strange phrase that jumps out at me is strange birds. Why would the speaker be seeing strange birds, and what do they symbolize?
Well, strange birds could be another way of saying the strange people the person will meet. Also, birds generally symbolize freedom because of their ability to fly. So the speaker could be implying that with freedom, the person being addressed will find many unexpected things.
Also, strange could be a synonym for unique, so it could represent how people are unique with different backgrounds and perspectives. Did anyone else notice how the passage starts out pretty negatively but changes to a positive tone later on? That would relate to the syntax of the poem, and that's pretty significant, I think. It's the negative experiences and hardships in life that make you stronger and allow you to get to the great things in life and succeed. And the speaker shows that you will succeed, but with a little caveat of 98 3/4% guaranteed, which demonstrates that you need to be careful and make good choices. It also adds an element of realism. The poem is stressing that nothing is 100% guaranteed in life. On a different note, did anyone else notice that in Life's a Great Balancing Act, each word is capitalized? I think this definitely means that each word has importance because there's emphasis on each word. I think that this is the central theme of the poem overall that the speaker is trying to convey very explicitly.
I also happen to know that this book was published in 1990, making it the last work Dr. Seuss published before his death in 1991. So maybe this book represented the last words of wisdom that he wanted to impart.
So that's a close reading. So can we close read other texts, like textbooks or articles?
Of course, so you may have to adjust the process for different disciplines and mediums.
So, like in history articles, for example, we probably wouldn't talk about the symbolism of the words, but maybe what the author was trying to emphasize, or maybe what biases they have. Maybe in the science article, we would probably look at like what the researchers are like trying to find out, and like methods that they're using, and like what other scientists have like found out already. Like that kind of information sort of that might be really important.
Exactly. While you might have to focus on different aspects of the text, these basic principles are pretty universal, and you can do a close reading of just about anything.
So what do you think? Did you get a sense of what a close reading from a Dr. Seuss text would look like? What do you think about? I think that sometimes teachers think, oh, well, I would read this text with my students, and we talk about what does it mean. But did you notice the close reading of the narrative and the point of view and the syntax and how the tone changed from the beginning to the end, and how they really took a close look at the capitalization and theme and even the copyright date? So it's really digging deep and really taking a close analysis and a close look at the text, more so than just, hey, students, what does this poem mean?
So one final thought is that to be prepared for college and the workplace that students will find themselves in, they must be taught to closely read texts, to really analyze a wide array of text types that they'll meet throughout their lives. These include stories and narratives, poetry, non-narratives, their textbooks, articles, newspapers, magazines, primary source materials, documents, and of course, e-sources. And so throughout our next years of our teaching careers, I think we'll all be thinking about how to make that happen for every student in every one of our classrooms. So thanks so much for joining us. Now we'd love, if you have any questions, to give some special attention to your questions.
Thank you, Diane and Kelly. This has just been so informative on such an important topic of close reading. I want to invite the attendees to use the chat box to write any questions that you might have as you did listen to Diane and Kelly. At this point, we do have two questions. I'll just read them to you, and you can answer to the audience. The first one is, how can a first grade teacher have students do a close read when they aren't yet ready or aren't yet reading very involved texts?
That's a really good question. We know that some of the books and the texts that students are reading at a first grade level, kindergarten level, some of those early primary grade levels are not that involved, and you know, they're very basic. So how does this work? How does this look? Well, it can absolutely happen in a read aloud setting, in a shared reading setting. The teacher can read aloud a text and of course model for students how to think about the characters and think about what's going on in the text, invite partner talk, have a class discussion. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the students are reading the words and decoding all of those kinds of difficult and challenging texts, but the teacher's there to read aloud and to support that. And it can also be done in a shared reading setting where everyone has access to the text. So it doesn't have to be that the students themselves are decoding the word, but that they're participating in the analysis and the close reading with the teacher.
Thank you. Does attending so much to the text mean that text-to-self connections don't matter anymore?
No, I know that lots of teachers are asking that question, but if you go back to what we were saying about Louise Rosenblatt, that what she was suggesting and what we need to remember is that the text is the focus of the thinking, and that text-to-self connections are very important because a reader interprets what they are thinking about from the message that's sent to them. But what often happens in classrooms is that the teacher never has the students then return to texts again. And so reading and relating to the text, but then going back to do a little deeper analysis of that text and seeing if what you're saying in some way does connect to the text. I think it's that we've all been in classrooms where one child said, offered a response to a text, and then the next child offered a response to that child, and on we went, and there was never any returning to the text. And so the Common Core standards with suggesting close readings are suggesting that we return to the text to check our interpretations, to expand our interpretations, but definitely not to not have them. Of course, a reader can't read a text without making a connection to it.
Thank you. Where do English language learners come in the Common Core? Are there any recommendations?
English language learners are being thought about throughout, especially if you take a look at the standards that are talking about accessing and expanding and developing language. And just like any other student in the classroom, they must be attended to from where they begin, and the instruction must be scaffolded to support their language acquisition and development, as well as their reading and writing literacy. So yes, all children are being given close attention in through the scaffolded suggestions of the Common Core standards.
Thank you. What would a close reading of Romeo and Juliet look like in a low-level 9th grade class? Now, I don't know if we have time for the entire close read, but do you have any ideas that you can share with this attendee?
Well, first of all, the teacher would have to begin and contextualize this. So we'd have to, as we suggested, you have to have some conversation about who are Romeo and Juliet, and what's going on in this story, and offer a contextual frame for it. And then you do a first reading, and the teacher may have the students do a first reading just to use as an assessment, so that the teacher could be looking to see what are they thinking, what are their interpretations. It's hard to do some of the Shakespeare without supports, because most of them were designed to be plays and not being read. So we'd have to chunk the text into smaller pieces and talk about it as we go through, with lots of modeling, lots of conversations, small group conversations, partner talk that continue to build as we return and continually analyze what's going on in this. To get them ready for this, there's lots of new versions of text, like is it Julio and I forget the name. They've made Sharon Draper has a very cleverly designed text that follows the same story of Romeo and Juliet. And so when we're teaching this to 9th graders, we often begin and read that story to build the whole idea. I think it's maybe Julio and I forget. It's two regular kids in a high school, and there's a play on the names of them. But anyhow, so I might begin by doing that and then coming back again and chunking the text, analyzing short passages of it, because Romeo and Juliet's a story that they're living, that the kids are living in high school and middle school. So not the ending, I hope, but all the way through. So I think it's called Julio and Romiette. But it's by Sharon Draper if anybody's looking to buy it.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. One last question. The 2 videos, are they available online? Are they on a YouTube, or any videos that the 2 you used, are they available online? I know, I just want to share with everyone that this recording is, or this presentation is recorded, so you will get the link to the PowerPoint, which will have the videos. But Diane or Kelly, are these videos available separately?
Yes, the first one, the Xtranormal, is on YouTube, I believe, or TeacherTube, one of those. And the second one was also found on YouTube when it examined the Dr. Seuss reading. We modified it a little. We took out some of the beginning because it was a bit long, but the idea is there behind that, so that's also available online.
Okay. Well, thank you. This, again, has been a very important topic, close reading. I want to invite the attendees to our next webinar with Dr. Lapp and Dr. Johnson in May. You will all be sent an invitation to that webinar. Argumentation and the Common Core is their second webinar, and then in the fall we'll have 2 more webinars, and we're very excited. So we thank you for your time this afternoon, Dr. Lapp and Dr. Johnson, very much, and for sharing your ideas and your expertise with us. And for everyone that has attended, thank you for your time. We know it's been a busy day, it's the end of the day, and thanks for logging on, and we hope to have you come back to the Sadlier webinars in the future. I have your emails, and you will get an email from me with the link to this webinar. So thanks again, and everyone have a great evening. Good night.
Good night.